Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a holistic coach and trauma-informed practitioner. This podcast seeks to break out of the echo chamber of societal narratives that perpetuate our institutions and challenge the status quo of wellness and beyond. Join me as we decolonize our minds, address and use our privilege, and prioritize inclusivity. Here, diverse experiences are honoured, and together we are fostering a space that stands for higher love for all. As a listener, you are not just here to passively consume. You're an ambassador for deep healing and societal evolutions, ready to engage in thought-provoking, challenging conversations. As your host, I'm committed to providing ever-expansive spaces that inspire us to contribute to a world defined by higher love. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Well, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you this morning. Thank you so much, Nilesh, for being here and welcome to the podcast.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So I'd love to just begin this morning by you introducing yourself in your own words to the listeners.
Okay, so hello, everybody. My name's Nilesh. I am a kind, compassionate, loving kind of guy, and that is the most important thing. But in my work, if you want the kind of official introduction, official titles, International Man of Mystery. No, I'm joking. I always make that joke because it was much easier when I was a doctor to say I'm a doctor, and now there has to be a whole story around what I do and who I help. But I help leaders master their emotions with compassion. I think if we go a step further, it's really about activating people's potential. And that's where this whole term self-mastery comes in. And mastering emotions with compassion it's the path, it's the boat we take on the journey as opposed to the outcome. So yeah, I typically I feel very blessed from going from working, over a decade in medicine to now working with all kinds of interesting people like film producers and people in the music industry, DJs, music producers, charity founders, entrepreneurs. I think what they all had in common is that they were all visionaries in their own way. They were all creatives. They were all doing something differently. And I have this phrase that they all wanted to go inwards so they can give outwards. Yeah, there's one other phrase I would say that I notice in all of them is at some point in their journey, these people that I worked with, they learned to not resist. So the phrase I have is don't resist, live differently. And, when you can release resistance from whatever stress or difficulties you're going through and move towards your authentic path, then, that's when you start to access more freedom, more love, more abundance, more joy. And isn't that what we all want?
Absolutely. It is. It definitely is from this side of the table anyway. I am super interested in your personal journey of moving outside of medicine because I don't meet many medical doctors who move into the area of work that you're currently in. I mean, I'm sure that there are a few out there, but you're quite a unique breed, I imagine. So I'm really interested in how did that come about? What was that journey out of medicine? What was the catalyst? What was happening for you to inspire that move?
I mean, I can tell various stories about this because, there are many different frames. But I'm going to tell the story about my father. So my father was an amazing man. In fact, he was a research scientist and used to create patents for the kind of coatings on the paint coatings for tables or even a coating for a stent. And he always wanted to be a doctor. And so when I became a doctor, he was very, very thrilled. And we had a great relationship. But it was in 2000. So I would have been just about 12 years old. And I was cycling home from hockey practice in the Netherlands where we were living at the time, cycling down this kind of little green leafy canal, and I saw there was a weird car outside the house. And as I opened the door, my dad was in bed and the whole left side of his body was completely paralyzed.
Oh no.
He of course had a stroke. He was in his 40s at the time, 47. And yeah, that was quite a life transformational moment for the whole of our family. And what I kind of witnessed afterwards was this, like, as many young boys do, is their dad's kind of a bit invincible, and then to see them learn to eat and walk and their speech be affected. Anyway, what ensued is a lot of other different chronic health problems with my father. So by the time I got to medical school, I think something was kind of ingrained in me that I wanted to get to the root cause of chronic disease. And that led me to lifestyle medicine. So when I started working as a doctor, I started to notice that, I studied hard, I became a GP, But the tools we had, the medications we were using, all of the treatment plans were a sticking plaster. And so, in fact, I was literally just talking with my colleague and close friend. He was my mentor when I was a GP, and he introduced me to lifestyle medicine. He said, you need to take a look at the way we're practicing differently. So basically, my father inspired me to think differently about health, which then inspired me to challenge kind of the status quo, if you like. That was the kind of the thing that led me throughout the whole of my life, just to question and be curious and say, is there another way of doing things? Can we get the same results through a different method? And so the story goes that I went and studied lifestyle medicine, and I started to see people's heart health reverse and diabetes reverse and erectile problems with dementia even improve and anxiety and depression reverse. And I think, wow, I'd never seen results like this. And it was all through behavioral change. So when I was working in lifestyle medicine, I realized there's just a set of habits that not only can treat disease, but also create optimal health. But the real issue was that people needed help with behavioral change. And so, yeah, so that led me on to the second stage of my journey, but I'll stop the story there. That's basically how I transitioned slowly out of medicine into doing things a little bit differently.
Amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that around your dad. My father actually had a stroke 5 years ago, and it's the same thing, whole left side of his body, his speech, his walking, everything being affected. So yeah, I can only imagine what that was like as a child to experience that. I mean, it was hard enough for me as a 30-year-old woman to experience that and kind of witness my father having to relearn to do all of these things. It must have been very impactful, I imagine, so early on in life, and for your whole family as well.
Yeah, I think that being a human it's really hard. People get ill.
Mm.
Relationship breakups happen. And this is the other kind of really core message I've personally experienced and I've witnessed through speaking to thousands of people, is that we sometimes lose sight of that. We lose sight of how difficult it is. And, for me, I would say on the whole, out of everyone in my space, the awakenings are either in shouts or whispers, and mine were kind of whispers. So, but I'm grateful that I had those whispers, because they've, led me to this path of freedom that I'm on right now.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm curious, at the time when you were making that transition into lifestyle medicine and, eventually into the work that you're doing now, what was the reception like amongst perhaps your medical peers, people within your family, friends? Did you experience any pushback or any kind of questioning of your direction at the time?
So it's very funny, this, and I love that question. So I've changed a lot since back then, but let me say that whenever you're going through any kind of change, or you're encouraging change in anyone else or transformation in anyone else, what I've learned is the most important thing is to embody it. And let me just say, it's really hard to do that, okay? And be easy on yourself. It takes 5, 10 years, and change is incredibly difficult. And never underestimate that these patterns are deeply ingrained in the reptilian parts of our brain since, the start of time. So there was pushback, but my approach back then was, well, this is the scientific evidence and I'm right. And, you guys should get up to speed. And it's quite funny. I can laugh at it now, because what I now know after studying the body and then the mind and positive psychology and then spirituality is that the most important treatments are the ones that both the patients and the doctors believe, patients and doctors believe in. And so beliefs are an enormous part of change and fulfillment and living a life of freedom. So yes, there was pushback, but clearly that was because other people's beliefs weren't in the same place as mine, and doesn't make it right or wrong. It just is that way. And it was that if you like, that kind of led me onto the journey with compassion and understanding, taking a deeper understanding of myself. Why did it trigger me so much? Still does sometimes, right? If people can't accept or see a point of view, we're human and we all want the best. And then compassion for others and really understanding, where did that come from? I think there's a narrative around change in general, that change is bad. I think that people can, judge change, and there's a deep need for stability and security and safety. And from the yogic perspective, that makes sense because we want to be rooted in our root chakra, etc. But I think that the way that we approach change with in a Buddhist sense, with a view of impermanence and everything is always changing, and a sense of excitement can be more fruitful. But yeah, there was a lot of pushback, and in medicine there is a hierarchy, and that was something that I openly admit I found very difficult to deal with. But it came from a place of trying to keep patients safe and the doctors safe, so also understand it.
Yeah, I was feeding into that question this morning because I was thinking back to, my mid-20s when I was working in insurance in the city. And I've got a degree from Cambridge. All of my friends at the time were working finance and law and medicine. And of course, like when I left insurance to go and teach yoga, one of my friends was like, "Are you having some form of a nervous breakdown? Do we need to call somebody?" There was a lot of pushback for me. So I could only imagine the kind of levels of pushback or questioning perhaps that you experienced when you were starting to transition. So yeah, I was really, really curious to ask about that. I'm curious too about the gaps, and you've touched on this, but I'd love to perhaps just go a little bit deeper on what you saw as the gaps within a conventional medical model, and the gaps within our conventional medical model within treating illnesses, disease, challenges that you were really trying to support through lifestyle medicine. What were the gaps there?
Yeah. So I mean, I have slightly allude to this kind of triangle, if you like, of body, mind, spirit. And this was, again, I'll share a little story. So my son was also a big inspiration to me. And when my son was younger, he started to have some challenges with his development. So he wouldn't make eye contact. He would scream randomly. And I'd take him to clubs and people would say that, your son's different. Basically, that led me to go and study the brain in quite a lot of depth. And I found various doctors like Dr. Daniel Amen and Dr. Mark Hyman, and people who were getting great results for kids in this with these challenges. And they all spoke about this real holistic approach. So they all spoke about not just the physical symptoms, but the psychological impact, the spiritual impact. And I became quite fascinated with that because I had no awareness of spirituality or no awareness of really of the mind at that stage. I wasn't meditating. And so, I think the gaps really come in the full holistic picture. And the way I deal with it now is the 4 parts of the self. So there's the physical self, there's the intellectual self, there's the emotional self, and there's the spiritual self. And our goal is, your full potential is all parts of you. And I use that word full potential because at your full potential, your body is in an amazing healing state. So you can create conditions where healing naturally occurs. I've seen that massively in my own life. I've gone in the last 10 years from being the guy who would be 2, 3 a.m. eating kebabs and smoking the occasional cigarette. Honestly, I was a bit wild like that, and drinking heavily on the weekends, like the status quo. It's like a lot of people were doing in my circles, to healing in any gut problems. I healed and reversed my gum disease. I healed my back pain. I've so many like minor health things have come in. I got my biological age clocked at significantly lower, like 20 years lower at one point. I got it clocked at. So these things genuinely work when you have this whole holistic picture. Let me just go into exactly why that is. So from a physiological perspective, when you're connected to your true self, you're engaging in the parasympathetic nervous system, essentially. And this is where heart rate reduces, breathing rate reduces, the gut finally gets a chance to rest and digest. And I know, a lot of this from your trauma background, Megan, but I mean, it's incredibly profound when you can be in that state more and more and more. To give a little spiritual example, this is kind of why, those yogis, you hear of those yogis who live really, really long, look really, really young, and also don't need to sleep much because they're always in this state, this parasympathetic state, this slower brainwave state, which is just incredibly healing for your whole system.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was just getting a vision of a teacher who I used to love going to when I used to live in Bali. One of my favorite yoga teachers, who is this kind of, he looked like an old kind of Balinese wizard. I can't even tell you what age he would have been, because he, exactly as you've said, he could,
Yeah.
the energy of his face looked so childlike, but he was probably, I mean, I couldn't even put a figure on it, but he could do handstands on, just his finger points.
Oh my God.
And but this funny moment just dropped into my head when you were speaking of, he started a class and everyone was asking so many questions of like, is it this? Is it this? Is it that, should I be practicing this? Should I do that? And he just kind of took a step back and he was like, the problem with all of you guys is that you've all become so clever that you've become stupid.
Yes.
I was like, yes, that's what we're doing, aren't we? Overcomplicating the things. And actually, when we come back to these models and ways of looking at things, then yes, the simplicity of, let's say, comes through. So just something that just dropped into my mind while you were speaking for some reason. But yeah, it was a real kind of light bulb moment for me. I just wanted to ask too, because I've asked about the gaps in the medical model, which we've just spoken about, but as you've come into the arena of self-development, I'm curious too if you have identified gaps within the, quote unquote self-development industry, or the way that we do things within self-growth, that you also now seek to fulfill within the work that you do.
Three things here. So the first is that there is, what I've noticed in self-development is that there is a sequence to things. And I have to remind myself of this. In fact, this is what my tattoos are about. I never ever thought I would get tattoos, but here you go. I'm here with tattoos. And when it comes to emotions, we see a lot of people out there saying, raise your vibe and, be in a positive state. And of course, science completely backs that up. Broaden and build theory from Barbara Friedrichsen. We can go into that in a minute. However, there's a sequence to the mastery of emotions. And, that's where self-compassion comes in. The ability, I like to call it the ability to embrace, enhance, and release any emotional state. And so awareness is the key. And I think a lot of self-development, if you see a 15-second clip on Instagram, which says, did you know visualization can do this? Or did you know that, even meditation can do this, or running can do this? It's great. Awareness is always the first step in your journey. And I'm continuously noticing and unfolding new levels of awareness. Even yesterday, I was triggered yesterday for the first time in a long time. And but it led to a much deeper level of awareness, where I could uncover the deeper wounds that were lying within me from childhood, from things that I experienced, from generational things, from societal things. So that's the first thing that the self-growth industry gets wrong, is we jump too quickly to action without awareness. The second thing I've noticed is around belief shifting work. And again, I've seen some really cool belief shifting stuff where it's super spiritual. You just go, the problems don't exist. And, and I get it. It's cool. Like that's cool. And then I've seen some that's like super neuroscience based, which was also cool. But I alluded to this. We want belief shifting to be about the whole self. So intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual. And really there is kind of a pattern with belief shifting that you can get into. And a lot of self-development work out there, it just says, oh yeah, you've got some limiting beliefs. It doesn't really tell you how to shift them. It doesn't really tell you how to identify them. It doesn't really say, is that something you need to do for the rest of your life or not, or how you go about these things. And then the last kind of thing that I'd like to share with people on the self-growth journey is about habits. So emotions, beliefs, and habits. The habits piece is, like I said earlier, there is actually an unequivocal set of habits that will help you live a very meaningful, fulfilling, healthy, happy life. And it's, I poo-poo data a little bit, but this, interestingly enough, a lot of the scientists that done the big research studies, they've also gone and studied in the East a bit, and that's what's led them to do the research studies. So I think there's a lot of self-development out there that doesn't have the scientific backing. So you really want the whole picture. If you're going off on your journey, you want to make sure, first of all, that there's a sequence to what you do. You're getting into the present moment. That's what this tattoo is first. That's the foundation for everything. If there's anything I shared with you, it's that. It's no matter where you are on your journey, if you're not feeling good or you want to change, get into the present moment and understand that has That's the most important starting point. That's the sequence. And then number 2, make sure you're incorporating the whole self when you're doing belief shifting, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. And last of all, when you're actually engaging in the habits, how you decide about what you're going to do for your well-being. Yes, it's important to tune into intuition, but also go with the data, go with what works in the data for you to ultimately, if you're on the self-growth journey, it is ultimately about happiness. That's ultimately what you're moving towards. Yeah. Last thing I'll say is that happiness piece, it is the domino for everything. And there is a big meta-analysis of like 240 studies from Ed Diener and Sonia Lyubomirsky, which clearly says that happiness is the domino for everything else in life. So happiness creates success, happiness creates better relationships, happiness creates better health. And it's so easy to miss that. And that, if you like, is the same thing I was alluding to at the present moment. So if you always start with this present moment, which is a state of pure happiness, joy, openness, love, and you're happy with where you are right now, that's an incredibly important place to start from. I really want to stress that, because it's very easy to get lost in lack. It's very easy to watch someone online and go, I don't have what they have. They're further along their journey than me. I need to do this program X, Y, and Z in order to feel better about myself. And it's a bit of a contradictory thing. Like we always have to snap you out of it and say, you're perfect as you are in this moment. Yes, we want you to grow so that you can help more people and create more things and be of more service in the world. But you're perfect right now, like as you are in this moment, with all of, the stories and the conditioning and all of the challenges. There you go. There's my soapbox.
No, not at all. A question just arose for me whilst you were speaking around like the end goal of self-development. What was coming up for me when you were talking about happiness is I've had a couple of experiences with clients where, we've had a stretch of time working together, and they then come to a session and they're like, I'm feeling really good. Like everything in my life is feeling good. I feel content. I feel relaxed. I'm, fill in the blank. But they've gotten to this point where they do feel quote unquote good. And then a question comes in of like, but what's going to happen, what's going to happen next? Or like, is it okay that I feel good? Or like trying to almost like find something that makes them feel like bad again, or like maybe we should work on this, or like, almost kind of like a contrived sense of trying to find an issue, because we've got into this state of like having to work on something all of the time. And that kind of addiction to healing, I guess, that's something that we can kind of stumble into. And it was an interesting experience for me, as a coach, as a practitioner, of me being like, but hang on, isn't this actually where we're just trying to get to? Like we're trying to get to a place of you actually just feeling good, and maybe you can just be in that without this need to pull something else into the picture. And I'm just curious, what comes up for you there around what is the end goal of self-development? I mean, I know that you mentioned around service and impact, and I'm just curious what comes up for you. It was just a question that arose for me.
Okay, as always, I'm going to go for my whole like holistic bit of science, bit of spirituality, but I'll start with a little story. So I just ran a private intensive for 2 of my favorite clients, a husband and wife, in Chicago. And I was there, I was walking in Chicago. It was about 6 a.m. I was walking to the gym, and I was overwhelmed, and I had tears of joy just streaming all the way down my face. And I want to share that with you because like in the week before, I was already feeling amazingly happy and peaceful. And there is no limit to how happy you can feel. Happiness is, if I'm going to broadly split up the emotions into love and fear, right? Happiness sits in love. Love is about expansion. Love is about creation. It is our natural right. It is ever present and is the very thing that creates everything in the world. So to the person that says, I feel kind of happy now, it's kind of like saying, oh, I've eaten it at this, Pizza Express, but that's the best food I can ever have in my life. But you don't know. Like Pizza Express is great, that's cool, but you just don't know what's there. And once you experience these things and you sit there and you feel that energy of it, it's undeniable. And there's nothing else I can say apart from it's an experience thing. But I'm going to come back to my term self-mastery, because it's a good point to come back to. So what do I mean by self-mastery? 2 words: authentic accomplishment. Okay, authentic accomplishment. And then I'm going to talk about the 4 stages of self-mastery, because what you're referring to with your client, Megan, which I loved, is that it's the first stage. And that is essentially peace is the first stage of self-mastery. Peace is actually a state we would say is almost, I don't really like to call it as levels, but it's almost a state that's kind of beyond happiness, which is a state where you need nothing and you have everything. And in this state, when you get to it, it's, someone bashes their car into you and you think, oh, that was unusual. Maybe this person is someone I need to meet today. That's kind of the state of peace. That's what it feels like, where you're in such a state where you can view everything as, perfect. The next stage is vision. Once you're at the state of peace, you've essentially tapped into your authenticity. Now it's important for you to set a vision for how you're going to serve and how you're going to help in the world. And the science backs this up. So there's some key components of what makes a flourishing life. And a life of flourishing comes down to having meaning and purpose. So where it's very important and the starting point is to be happy in the now presence, the next phase is intention and purpose and meaning. So you set a vision. Stage 3 is then alignment. And this is where stuff gets difficult, okay? And this is where you've set a vision. You were quite happy in the now. And now, because you've set a vision, you need to align yourself with a new identity. And this is where a lot of the real kind of shadow work, healing work, where from the outside, it might look like chaos to other people, but, on the inside, you're working through it. And then the final phase 4, is giving and sharing. When you're in alignment with your true self, you found a state of peace, you've got a vision, and now you're giving all of your gifts that you're here to give to the world, which we all have. So that's what I would say to anybody, is where I can understand that they might feel like, yeah, I feel content and, is this it? Is this where I am? But you never know how great it's going to get. And then I would also say, and I just nudgingly and jokingly challenge them, that if you're feeling that good, it's selfish to not have a vision and share your amazing gifts and your love and vibration with the world. And by the way, I will say something really important. This doesn't have to be like a grand vision, like help 1 million people. It could literally be, your vision could be to be, the most amazing stay-at-home parent. It'd be, to be the most committed role model of a son or a daughter or whatever it is. Those things are equally as beautiful. But it's important you create some vision, because that is essential to human life. We've been given this phenomenal gift of a brain that can do insight and planning and have awareness. So why wouldn't we use that? It's a complete gift.
Yeah. And something that I'm really hearing there is a big theme that's come up within quite a few of my podcast conversations recently, is this sense of like individualization within self-development and personal growth, that it's certainly a big part of anyone's personal growth journey is unique to you. What are the things holding me back? What are the areas of my life that I need to heal, personal experiences that I need to heal, etc. But the tendency to perhaps stay in that, as opposed to what you've just expressed of getting yourself to a certain point where you do experience this sense of peace and happiness, and then offering that up to a vision of, okay, well, how can I be within the world and how can I offer this up? Yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, when you get perhaps to that point of like, I've certainly perhaps lent at some point in time myself within this, and certainly witnessed it in others, this almost like addicted cycle to healing of like, I'll just take the next thing off the shelf, heal that next thing off the shelf, and you get caught in this kind of problematic loop of always healing something. And what I kind of hear there is like, then perhaps that is an invitation to step into, okay, I've got to this certain point of healing, a certain amount within myself, and then offering that up to the vision, what I'm bringing to the world. Is that right? In terms of...
So glad you brought up this point. We're so aligned. It's something I talk about a lot. It's basically like your yoga teacher usually said, the problem is you guys are so clever, but actually stupid. I don't want to paraphrase the thing. It's the same thing. As humans, we're addicted to our own suffering. And I know this, sometimes I can see it in myself. And I just want to say this, I'm not saying this as some kind of high and mighty person who's going, no, it's like, we're human. It's really hard being human. People die. We care. Like, being a human also means you care. And if you care, it means you get stressed. That's not, that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I mean, look, I think We're addicted to our own suffering. And that's why the present moment is everything. And to get super spiritual and kind of quantum physicsy for a minute, if you really look at us under a microscope and down to the atomic level, subatomic level, then you realize that we're vibrating energy, we're energy. And not only that, you realize that things are kind of blinking in and out of existence. And this is why people for thousands of years have been speaking about the present moment, because the addiction to suffering is only an addiction to the past stories that you've been telling yourself. I'm not worthy. I'm not capable. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. I'm stupid. I'm worthless. I'm powerless. These are all the most common deep rooted beliefs, which you might not actually kind of think about verbatim, but it's the root belief. Like, and what you realize is the addiction to suffering will start to cease the more you enter into the present moment. I love what Deepak Chopra said. He said kind of like, it's like when you enter into the present moment, it's like washing a dirty tea cloth in a beautiful stream. And each time you're doing it, you are cleaning you're essentially purifying the mind.
Yeah.
So if anyone is finding themselves, and I've definitely done this, reaching for that next thing, yeah, you're right. The invitation is to stop and ask yourself, what's my intention? If the intention is, I'll be fixed, I'll be happy, I'll be whatever, when, then essentially what we're doing, to bring back to your point about end goal, is we're creating a means goal. We're saying that we need to do this thing in order to get to the end goal, which is happiness, peace, joy, fulfillment, love, whatever the emotions are that you're wishing to experience. And so I'm not saying that you should never do those courses, but just touch into the intention of it. Come back to the present moment. Use the variety of practices which I'll suggest, whether it's meditation, breathwork, journaling. But the biggest one, which very few people do, is complete silence and solitude. And I mean silence. I mean no phone, no talking, no music, no books. And if you can either do that in an intense period, or you do that as a regular period. I try and do it every morning for a few hours where, it's when my kids aren't around.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that go?
Yeah. Well, with my kids, they're daddy talks to them, of course. But yeah, the silence is a really, really, really important piece, because you realize when you start the silence after a while, what you're actually doing is, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's a good example is a child. Like if a child's talking to you and you never listen to it, it will just continue getting louder and louder and louder. Dad, daddy, daddy, until you have to, and that's what your inner chatter is like. And, your mind is where you live. It's essential to be tuned into that. So to summarize, I think we are addicted to suffering. I think we can become addicted to healing. And one of the most important things to realize is to come back to the present moment as much as possible. And check in on your intention whenever you are, about to take action.
Yeah, I love that. And another question just arose for me. I love this because so many questions popping into my head, which I wasn't expecting to ask you during this conversation, but they're coming in anyway. Yeah. But a question came in when we were just talking about feeling more and more peace and happiness, and like expanding our capacity for those things. I know for myself, and I know a lot of people who, over the past kind of couple of years, with so much going on in the world, so much suffering happening, very real life situations within the world, who've almost developed, and myself included here, a bit of a complicated relationship sometimes with joy and peace and happiness, because it's almost like the more, I'll speak for myself here. There have been moments this year where the more peace, happiness, and joy that I've experienced, which has been in total abundance, getting married and all of the wonderful things that I've experienced this year, the more that I have experienced of that, there's also a part of me where I guess, the guilt and the shame comes in of like, but there are so many people who don't have access to this, or who aren't safe within the world. And the more time that I spend in love, in joy, in peace, there is this little part that's like, but is that okay? Or like, who am I to have all of this? Do you see what I mean? It's like, how do we continue this kind of relationship to continually build love and joy and peace within ourselves, whilst also simultaneously holding everything else that's happening within the world?
Do you ever, Megan, breathe thinking I shouldn't breathe so much because there's not enough air in the world for other people?
Not a thought that's crossed my mind, no.
And I know you don't mind me being provocative, but that is, and I listen. Of course, there are complete terrors going on in the world right now. You know, they're not going to deny it. We're not going to bypass the situation. Completely true, and it's real. It exists. This is a world of duality, good and bad, up and down, left and right and wrong. However, and this is my experiences through meditation. And by the way, just full disclosure, a few years ago, I would have found this difficult to hear. So if anyone is finding it difficult to hear, I completely get it. But we didn't come from that space. You know, we came from a space that was infinite, eternal, limitless, where there was pure joy, pure bliss, pure peace. I'm not saying you need to be like that right now in this experience, in your human experience, but that's essentially what you're tapping into when you do the introspective practices of silence, meditation, journaling, and breath work, is you're tapping into your true self, your authenticity. And it's, you know, the other example I can give is you go on holiday. For anyone who's kind of, you know, on their corporate job or working, listening to this and thinking, Megan's made the jump from corporate, I'm going to do this. You go on holiday and you take the trip, you finally get to the hotel, you put your feet on the sun lounger, you order a cocktail, and then what do? You go, and that's joy. It's a releasing. Joy is a diagnosis of exclusion, right? So it's actually a natural state. And all of the other emotions of fear and lack and frustration and worry and envy and shame, they're actually emotions to keep us safe. They're preparing us. This is a really good point. I did mention the broaden and build theory, so let's dive into this, okay? The other reason why it's so important to intentionally create positive states, okay, is because, first of all, our mind is like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. And second of all, in really famous studies, one, open hearts build lives. A lot of the positive psychology work from people like Barbara Fredrickson and Ed Diener and Martin Seligman. Please read these things. Don't take my word for it. It basically says that positive emotions have a very important purpose in the world. So they help you, number one, broaden your horizons. Okay, so right, you are going through a divorce, or you're going through a difficult relationship breakup, or you're going through illness. Well, a positive state, if you manage to get there, may help you creatively problem solve what you're going through in that moment. And there's various experiments that can prove that. The second thing that positive emotions do is it builds your resources. So basically, it helps you with mindfulness. It helps you create a sense of purpose. It helps you improve your health and your energy levels. So just think about this. So if we're intentionally creating these positive states, yes, we are accepting that there is suffering in this world. It is inevitable. This is a Buddhist sense. Illness, death, old age, breakups, they are inevitable. So we must resource ourselves for these things. And that is having the wisdom and the intentionality and the foresight to go, okay, to bring your example back of that client. Okay, you're feeling good right now. We need to fill your cup up. We need to resource you, because guess what? In a few weeks, someone might die. Something might happen. You might lose your job. We don't know. And so, yeah, there's always enough positive emotions as well, I would say. If you are in a caring profession, you absolutely must focus on it, because if you're caring for people, the last thing you want, which we know, is to be under-resourced and then snap and, have more struggles, which happens to us all. But yeah. And then last thing to say is, again, problems are natural in our human experience. So the positive emotions will help you creatively solve those problems.
Yeah. I love that, because, you only need to look at how many burnout counselors, therapists, doctors there are in the world to look at that sense of self-resourcing. And, what I really hear there is, if you have a very strong why within your work, or a strong vision, want to be of service to the world, you can either do that rooted in love, or you can do it rooted in fear. You're going to end up, the vision might be the same, but the energy that you're bringing to it will be very, very different. And it was reminding me too of a couple of months ago, I interviewed Fritzi Horstman, who's the founder of Compassion Prison Project. She works to educate the prison system to raise trauma awareness. And something she said to me was around really being responsible on a personal level for the energy that we are bringing to the world, because there is so much suffering. So either we can contribute to that by bringing our own suffering or our own pain into the world every single day, or managing that, or taking steps to manage it ourselves if we have the capacity to do so, so that we can be responsible for the energy that we are contributing to within the world. It's really, what was kind of coming through of like, regardless of, the vision can be the same, but what the difference is, what I hear is like doing it rooted in fear or doing it rooted in love.
Amazing. That's just full circle. That's exactly what I was, alluding to at the very start of our conversation with the self-growth industry. It's this exact same thing. I love it. And yeah, let's if we've got a moment to talk about the neuroscience of empathy and compassion, because it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I experienced burnout as a doctor. And, I remember vomiting once in the room whilst a patient, whilst I was in a consultation with a patient. And those were the times, it was quite, I was by no means as well. Some of my colleagues were far more, intense in that than I was. But empathy has a different brain signature. So a study from Tanya Singer from the Max Planck Institute in 2014, they basically put people through MRI scanners. They trained one group in empathy and they trained one group in compassion. And some people at home are like, oh, empathy and compassion are the same. They're not. And what they did is they showed these people images of suffering, which of course, as humans, it's visceral, we feel it. And then they were asked to respond with empathy or compassion, and then they were put through MRI scanners. Well, the empathy group had activation in the anterior insular and the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Now, these are areas that are the same areas that light up in physical pain. So all my empaths out there, all the people who go to a concert and they feel tired, or they feel like heavy, or they go into the supermarket and feel tired and heavy, or they have a conversation with a loved one and they have to take like a week off because it's just such a difficult one. It's okay. It makes sense. It's because you're literally felt pain. Whereas compassion lights up the ventral striatum. It lights up the medial orbitofrontal cortex. These are areas associated with reward and care and love. So it's this classic thing about like the paradox of the world. It's like if you're an empath, it kind of drags you further down sometimes too much without the compassion, because the compassion rewards you and makes you feel good. And so the key difference is the motivation to act. So compassion has the motivation to act, whereas empathy is just, I feel you. Compassion is, I hold you, or it's my intention to heal you. So I know there'll be people who are in caring, whether that's a family member or a job. And if you are feeling burnt out, it just makes sense. If you're feeling the pain, just like you said about being in the space of love first is exactly right. It's the most important thing.
Yeah. On my compassionate inquiry training with Gabor Mate, he talks about what I guess therapeutic arenas call compassion fatigue. And he was like, in my mind, there's no such thing. It just means that you've stopped being compassionate with yourself, as in you've stopped self-caring and just putting yourself in a space of caring for others without taking a step back and noticing what's happening for you. And I guess that's an invitation for, anyone that's within this space, how important it is to keep taking care of ourselves so that we can continue to be of service and impact in whatever way, shape or form that is.
Yeah. And, there's a variety of things that come up there. And I love the way you described that, Megan, how Gabor describes that. I think so often there's such an identity around being a helper or a pleaser. And, I know this myself, and it's ingrained culturally that we have to put others first at our own detriment. And I know Gabor speaks about this, how that's associated with autoimmune disease and, broken relationships and all kinds of things. And yeah, I mean, I know that personally. It's been very, very difficult when you're that person who's giving all the time. And yeah, and that brings us full circle around to the first piece, which is probably the most difficult thing, is to be aware of how full your cup is and where you are emotionally in a moment-to-moment basis. Because when you get into the kind of a dysregulated nervous system, your mind plays all kinds of tricks on you. I was there yesterday. It will play all kinds of tricks on you. It will say, this person's out to get you, or this is wrong, or, all kinds of, just in mindfulness, they call it that you're ignorant to actually what's going on. Well, it's like you're not seeing clearly. So yeah, I definitely resonate with that. And the other thing I would mention is, if you are in the growth journey, and I use the analogy of filling your cup. and it's a very common analogy. But, like I spoke about the different stages, sometimes you're on your growth journey and you get a bigger cup. So the same love that once filled your cup won't fill it. And you could be doing the same practices. And in that case, more love is needed. The more you expand your cup, the more love is needed within your cup. And that's been a difficult one for me to understand, because sometimes you could be doing the same practices and notice that you're still feeling depleted. So that's not something that you're doing wrong. That just means you're expanding, you're growing into something much bigger, you've got more capacity to give and love. So you need to fill yourself up before you do that.
Yeah, makes complete sense. A question that I'd love to ask is around this self-mastery, a huge essence to your work. In what ways do you feel like self-mastery is essential given the times that we're currently living in?
Well, two reasons come to mind. The first is we're in a very unique period of the world and history where we have access to all the information we could ever want, an abundance of information, and an abundance of resources to contact people. So there has never been a better time to distinguish, what is my purpose? What do I want? Who am I really? Because when you gain clarity on these things, I mean, it's a phenomenal thing. And you're not only tapped into what you love, but you can help a lot of other people. So I'd say, right now in the world, it's more important than ever to get used to these terms of emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, self-mastery, stepping into your authenticity. And I suppose the second one is kind of interrelated, but self-mastery, like I say, it's about authentic accomplishment. And by the way, if you're doing authentic accomplishment, it is always in the service of others. Okay. It's not, it's always from love. So that's why I haven't made the definition longer, just authentic accomplishment. The other reason why it's needed is because there's 3 truths I have for self-mastery. So we spoke about the 4 stages. There's 5 pillars, 2 words, 3 truths, 4 stages and 5 pillars. The 3 truths are, the first truth is to know and express who you truly are. The second truth is to accomplish what's meaningful with ease. And then the third truth is to commit to the disciplines of human flourishing. So that's why this is really needed right now, because if you're on the journey of self-mastery, you are going inwards, you're looking at yourself, how can I make myself flourish? So I can, even at a micro level, right? If I can encourage my brother, my mother, my family around me to start flourishing, well, the ripple effect of that is far beyond our wildest imagination, right? So one kind act ripples out to 125 others through the 3 degrees of influence, that number of kindness. It's all data there. So we're far more powerful than we really know. And right now, when there is so much challenge with mental illness and anxiety and depression across the world, and there's literally never been a better time to do it. Shall I talk about the 5 pillars of self-mastery? So you guys,
sure.
So this is rooted in the positive psychology movement on flourishing. And I've touched on it already, but basically Martin Seligman, he came out, in quite some time ago, actually. His first theory is in the 70s. And he changed the game in psychology. Everybody was focused on fear and lack and problems, and he was starting to focus on potential and solutions. And so he found in his research, what I love about him is he kind of found research and then he debunked his own research and made better research. And so his first kind of big book was called Authentic Happiness, which identified 3 pillars for happiness, which is essentially meaning, positive emotions, and flow. But as he went deeper into the research, he found what makes human not just happy, but flourish is when you add in these 2 other pillars, which is meaningful relationships and accomplishments. So the 5 pillars of self-mastery is, I call them a compassionate mind, courageous purpose, calm energy, which helps you accomplish, collaborative connections, and creative flow. And so if you're continuously coming back to these things, you're on the journey, you're on the path of self-mastery, you're getting towards peace. And then, your vision, everything's going to be created from there.
Amazing. And how do you experience it working with, I imagine that this is a big change, working as a GP and then now working with high-level entrepreneurs. And how do you experience, or how do you witness that ripple effect working with people in that area?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. That's exactly why I started doing it, because When I was a GP, I went to work in occupational health, which is working in companies' well-being. And I remember working with one guy who was really struggling. And I thought, well, why don't I work with the leaders? Because the leaders, if you help them flourish, they're leading dozens, if not hundreds of people sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have seen it, and probably that's often the biggest compliments I receive is when my client's wife or husband, in fact, 90% of our clients are women, so often it's the husband or the boyfriend or the mum or the father that comes back and their life starts to improve. A lot of the ripple effect goes under the radar, but I know then if other people are noticing the shifts in energy and emotions and their self, then I know that the effect is profound. But another really cool story is someone we worked with a long time ago. They run this amazing charity which has basically challenged the status quo on nutrition in medical schools. They got nutrition training signed by the Prime Minister on the curriculum. And that for me that was exactly why I got into the work I did, because if I could help support those people who are doing missions that ripple out. I mean, if you think about doctors learning about nutrition now, the ripple effect of that over decades is enormous. Yeah, and one other of my clients who they're making now, so they were doing some film production, but after working together and stepping more into their heart center, this is what happens when you step into your heart center. You magnetize amazing people towards you, and they met this amazing script writer, and they formed a film company in Hollywood, which is now making spiritual movies with like big stars, basically. And it will be out probably in a couple of years. So fingers crossed. The spiritual movies, obviously, they all have a purpose to spread love across the world.
God, watching a spiritual movie sounds great. Let me know
Well,
when that one's out.
Disney movies are spiritual movies. If you ever, I mean, Harry Potter, so spiritual. If you read between the lines, it's like you gotta. Yeah, it's anyone
Mind you,
who's
I think
creative.
that there have been so many like box sets or things which also I perceived as a spiritual experience. Like Sex and the City in my early 20s was also a spiritual experience. I guess you can throw that one in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that just piqued my interest. You said 99% of the people that work with you are women. I'm curious about that. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, no, well, slight correction, 90%. But
90%.
Do you know what I think? I think I've noticed some really interesting things about women. And it's really interesting because let's just say I probably could have learned it a bit earlier in my life and I would have saved myself a lot of pain. But women are amazing divine beings. They're beings who are, intuitive naturally. And by the way, this might be a massive generalization, but I'm talking about some of the unique challenges and gifts that women are bestowed with. So they're very intuitive, they're very sensitive, they absorb a lot of emotion. Obviously, with the biology and their cycles, their emotions will naturally go up and down. And the other thing I've noticed a lot is that they're quite often kind of oppressed and undervalued and discriminated against and, disrespected and undermined. And so self-compassion, which remember, self-mastery is the goal, self-compassion is the vehicle. It's so needed for women because there's a couple of really unique challenges. The first thing which I've noticed is just like for women, beauty is like a status thing. And God, there's so many things you have to do to be beautiful as a woman. There's makeup, there's primers, there's all the different eye gear and microneedling, Botox and hair. And I can understand why it's a big deal now when, it's a wedding day or you have a special occasion because you've been working up to this thing. So beauty is of a very high value. And the kind of the flip side of that is it takes a lot of time and energy. And there's a lot of judgment like amongst fellow women. The second thing is, that they're just naturally biologically have so much more to think about. There's a lot more overthinking. It's natural for a lady to, want to be safe and want stability and security because guess what? The cycles and emotions and hormones are naturally flowing and a daily rhythm for women doesn't quite make sense because, certain periods going to be more higher energy and certain periods you're not. Yeah, and then, the third unique challenge is probably very apt for you, Megan, is the career family kind of challenge as well. And I see that a lot. You're kind of expected as a woman to do it all. So I think those unique challenges are all things about the self. They all have big impacts and when you love and care for your emotional health, which is quite often overlooked. And I absolutely love working with women. I think it's a complete joy and a treat to do so. I'm very blessed that I get to do it and learn.
Yeah. No, it was just curious for me because my partner is a men's coach, and certainly I would say that the men's work field is far less, I guess, saturated than like women doing healing modalities or self-development. And yeah, it was just curious to me that was also within your demographic of clients. So yeah, interesting. I'd love to ask as well, I always find this fascinating, how the work that you do impacts the way that you parent as well. I always love to ask that. How does that work for you?
Oh, great. I'm so glad you asked. So my two kids, I've got Freddie, who's 7, and Millie Amelia, who's 3. And yeah, they are amazing. You see the smile on my face. They're both incredibly energetic, loving, just fun kids. So my work, how does it, I got to be honest with you. Like I said at the start, it is really hard. Being a parent it's the hardest thing. It's the closest relationships that give us the most growth. So they have been the people that have shown me my deepest wounds always. I think one thing, if you're talking about practically, how do I do it? I try my best to do questions, and I'm very playful because I know that with kids, it's quite easy to just shift the energy. And so, for example, we play a game in the supermarket quite often. They're in the supermarket and they want, "Oh, Daddy, can I have these sweets? Can I have this? Can I have this?" And then I say to them, I'm like, "Oh, okay. Do you want to be the daddy?" And we play this game, and they're like, "No, I don't want to be the daddy. I want to be that." So I listen to them a bit, and then when they're doing unreasonable requests, I let them be the parent, and I be silly with them. So I try as much as possible to do things together. So, for example, we've started doing this thing called silly time. I've tried as much as possible to avoid screens, but it's nearly inevitable. But on the whole, they don't watch screens like in the week with me and on the weekend. So instead, I say you get silly time with Daddy, which means that in order for them to get silly time, then they also there's a community thing, like they help tidy up, they help we help each other then have that good time together. And then for silly time, I say I'll do whatever you want for 10 minutes, and I'm a zombie or I'm a dog or a cat or whatever it is, and we just be. And I really enjoy that because I'm quite silly at heart, really. So those things, community, that kind of community feel with them, and playing a bit of role reversal, not taking things too seriously, switching up the energy. I feel like with emotions, I've got my son into the other day I spent a week with him, and he's lovely, but at the same time, as a parent knows, requests, if you're on a half-term week, the requests are deep, right? And so he was just one too many requests that day for me. And I said, "Okay, Freddie, we're going to pull the car over and we're going to clear our energy together." And we sat down, we did like a loving kindness meditation together. Okay, now you can ask me, because Daddy was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of things you've been asking me. And he was like, "Oh, thank you, Daddy." Yeah, but sometimes for all the parents out there, it's not easy, and you do get things wrong. And I think probably the ultimate thing in my own journey has been releasing from the shame of being a perfect parent, and that was definitely something I struggled with. Like when I started, like, my kid's going to be the best. I'm going to be the best father. People are going to be, "Oh, look how amazing your kids are." It's like I was just completely released from all that. And if you see me out and about in Winchester, my kids like running on the scooter here and doing this, they're like, that's I'm allowing them to be as they are, and focusing less on my releasing any internal shame I have about being a good parent, whatever that is. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, I can only imagine, I don't yet have a family, but I can only imagine that having children is like a continual invitation into deeper and deeper amounts of self-compassion, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It really teaches you a lot about your beliefs, because no matter how you want to find out limiting beliefs, do something difficult, and having kids is difficult. And so you will find out when you start to spend time with them, all of the rules you have about how they should be and how their lives should be, and how you should be as a parent. And it's a telling thing in a very, it's a great test in letting go as well, because, on one level you love them dearly with all your heart, but you also have to kind of let go and allow them to be and make their own mistakes and do whatever it is they need to do. So
amazing. We'll just start wrapping up, because I've definitely done that thing of going over time, and I could definitely sit here for at least another hour just having a good deep dive into all sorts of things. Just a couple of questions. The first one just being, what is your vision for your work next or going forward for 2025 and beyond? What's your current vision moving forward?
So interestingly enough, you experienced this, Megan, I've been stepping into more energy healing work, and it's taken a lot of me to come out. I was in the closet doing energy healing.
Wow.
Now I'll probably be putting that more front and center. And I have visions of group healings, which is what I was doing my trainings on. So working with fewer people one-on-one, but more in a group, and inviting people to experience what you experienced in that. The other thing that I have loved, but because my kids were so young, I haven't done it as much, is live workshops and live speaking. And so we ran our first event at Soho House in October, and it was so much fun. And so I definitely have plans to do either our own events or go speaking at the places that are aligned. Yeah. And then the third thing is I love creating content, but I've had a lot going on this year. And so I've on purpose been funneling a lot into my kids and my family. And so, I think next year there'll probably be more space to get even more creative, more real, more raw. And just top secrets that I've written hundreds of poems that just haven't been released. So hopefully you'll see some of those poetic musings online.
Amazing. And then just lastly, what last share or invitation or takeaway would you love listeners to go away with at the end of this conversation?
Don't resist. Live differently.
Wonderful. Short and sweet, but infinitely profound and powerful. Love it. Thank you so much. Was there anything else that you wanted to share, or ways to get in touch with you, or anything else that you would like to share at the end of the conversation?
Yeah, I love connecting with people. And so please do drop me a message on Instagram at Dr. Satguru, DrSatguru. My website is the same, just .com. And please do drop a message. Let me know what you're doing in your growth journey, and we can talk about growth. But I also just wanted to express lots and lots of gratitude. I've done a fair few podcasts, and I've really, really enjoyed Megan's flow style. We connected ages ago. So yeah, you guys, if you're listening in, you're lucky to have Megan as your host and all the guests she gets on. And yeah, I really look forward to connecting with you and Casper more in the future.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. I've loved this conversation as well. And thank you again for the experience I had earlier this week of experiencing firsthand your work and your energy healing. So big thank you to you for the multiple points of contact this week. Been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references, and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.